Okay, we are live.
On MTV. We are.
You're watching Mentionables TV, and number 12 in our series of questions that no Christian can answer. We're answering these questions. The questions come from the Non Sequitur YouTube channel, and this is today's question.
Most sections of Christian theology, there's typically one of two afterlives you'll get into when you die. There might be different subsects of this, but generally speaking there are these main two ones, heaven or hell. So my question would be, why would you want either of those? Let me lay it out. You can either go to heaven and have no free will, or you can go to hell and burn forever. Take your pick. If you go to heaven, everything's happy at all times, which means you're not allowed to feel sadness. You'll be worshiping God until the end of days, and there's going to be no end of days, so it's going to keep going forever and ever, which means you effectively have no will of your own. You are forced to worship this deity until who knows when. Now, if you go to hell, then you're going to be burning forever, but at least you have your free will. In neither of these are you given a choice or a chance to be anything but what you will be shaped and molded into. In both of these, you will effectively be a slave, whether you have your free will and you're burning and tortured, or you have no free will and thus are effectively stuck in unending servitude. I don't believe either of these places exist, and I have no reason to believe either of these places exist. But it seems that a lot of Christian theists want these places to exist. And my question would have to be, why? Both of them sound absolutely abysmal.
Cyrus the Skeptic asks us to consider heaven and hell. My answer is going to be brief. I don't want to keep you here for an eternity. What Cyrus is responding to is more really his own imagination than what the scriptures tell us eternity will be like. So, first, eternal hell. Yeah, I wouldn't pick that. So that's an easy one to answer. But what about heaven? Are we just going to be in heaven droning on the chorus of I could sing of your love forever and ever and ever and ever and ever? No. In fact, the biblical picture isn't even that we spend an eternity in heaven, as in disembodied souls up in some celestial realm. The eternal state is the unification of heaven and earth as resurrected, embodied persons living and working and exploring and enjoying God's creation as it was originally meant to be, and likely even better. Besides that, the Bible doesn't really give us much detail on what it'll be like, what the day-to-day will be like. Most of the problems that Cyrus poses through are just rooted more in imagined details that he's invented rather than what the Bible actually teaches. So once again, another failed internal critique that can't help but smuggle in a bunch of concepts that really just aren't part of biblical Christianity.
Okay, I'd like to preface my answer here with this answer to the broad misunderstanding of the afterlife as it is taught in the Bible. So this heaven-hell dichotomy kind of assumes this afterlife where either you're somewhere in the sky with God or you're somewhere underground with the devil. The Bible teaches resurrection. So rather than saying afterlife, a more appropriate term would be new life. What does that mean? It means you're getting your physical body back. You're not going to have your feet in the clouds, you're going to have your feet on the ground when Christ returns. So humans who are redeemed will live in a new heaven and new earth, in this new and perfected universe that occurs after the final judgment. So before we talk about heaven and hell, and my answer is going to use the terms heaven and hell, just generally speaking of the categories of the new life for the redeemed and the post-life for the irredeemed. Now let's proceed. Well, first of all, this argument seems to argue that if something is unpleasant, then it is therefore untrue. Now, we know this is fallacious. This objection of heaven and hell is a poor argument against the existence of God. And if God exists, then heaven and hell are a natural consequence of his existence. Now let's talk about God's nature. God is and should be understood as the source of all things good. So we understand that God is beauty, God is love, God is wisdom, God is freedom, God is justice, and so forth. Now imagine bad. Let's talk about bad. Bad is the absence of good. It's not a thing in of itself. It's the absence of a thing. So for instance, property is good. Therefore theft is bad. Life is good. Therefore murder is bad. Personal autonomy is good. Therefore submission by force is bad. And so forth. Now imagine a world in which all good things are fully realized and there's no possibility of the bad things. Now imagine its opposite. Imagine a world in which no good thing can exist. All good things are fully withdrawn. Now this is the difference between heaven and hell. Does this mean that there's no free will in heaven? Well, consider this. In the world I currently live, there are some aspects of this world that lack some good. One of those is that we lack full self-control. So for instance, we don't want to overeat and damage our health, but sometimes we can't resist. We don't want to be rude or unpleasant to people, but sometimes we do. We don't want to lash out at our children when they irritate us, but we can't control ourselves sometimes. Now imagine a world in which there's total self-control. I can actually fully control my actions and be a good person. So I do, because I've chosen to be good. I don't have the will to be bad. And I get there because I currently don't have the will to be bad. I've chosen to enter a world in which I have total self-control over my actions, and I desire my actions to be good. I got there by exercising my free will in this world. I've chosen in this world to enter a world in which my will is fully redeemed and I can finally exercise self-control. But that doesn't mean I'm an automaton. I'm not a robot that has to do one thing or pursue one path. No. We pursue beauty. Maybe we do it through art. Maybe we do it through music. We pursue wisdom and knowledge. So we enjoy reading. We enjoy exploring. We enjoy science. Those are all good things, and we can choose the path that we take to the good things. And because they're good, they honor God. In the new world, I have plenty of options of good things that I can pursue, and no matter what good thing I pursue, it honors God. In hell, however, there is no self-control. There is no freedom of will. There's no possibility of pursuing anything good because the good is absent. And this is a natural consequence of rejecting the source of all things good. So we have total freedom to accept or reject the good now. In heaven and hell, our will is fully realized. Our decision is fully realized. We've either rejected the source of all things good, or we've accepted it, and we achieve the consequence of that. In heaven, I have total freedom of will, because that's a good thing.
Now, this question on heaven and hell was a very bizarre question. I'm not really sure how to address the perception of the afterlife that this person has. So rather what I'm going to do is just kind of flesh out how I believe it should be viewed. And so rather than whatever image this person is seeing, wherever it is that you got your idea of heaven and hell, I'm sorry, someone has done you a disservice. This is not heaven and hell as painted in the Bible, in the Christian framework of the view of reality. So let me just set the stage of two very, very key issues that you need to understand in order to have a right view of this issue. Number one, what is the chief kind of issue, the problem between man and God that heaven and hell are part of the resolution? And that is sovereignty. God is sovereign, man wants to be. And so the whole wrestling thing with mankind throughout all of history has been us in rebellion against God. That we don't want him to be king. We don't want him to tell us what to do. We don't want to do things his way. That we want our way, and we don't want to bow the knee. Thank you for your creation, but please leave us alone. Have a nice day. Goodbye, God. So that is kind of the situation that mankind finds ourselves in. Then there's also the idea that Christianity teaches the world is broken. Things do not function as they should. We do not want things as we should want. We have selfishness and pride and corruption and desires that we shouldn't even be there, that are not part of our design, that are aberrations and corruptions and perversions of the way God made the world and made mankind to function. And in heaven, all of that gets put right. And so if we take a look at heaven and hell based on looking at through that lens of the situation, then in the afterlife, all of those people who say, Lord, I will not bow the knee. I do not want you to be king. I want to be in charge of my life. No God, no sovereign. Thank you very much. Then God says, okay, you go over here in this place called hell. Now we could talk about what, the fire and what that means, but there's the torment and everything. I think a lot of that is largely symbolic. Talking about the place where the worm dies not, and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, and it's a place of fire, and it's a place of darkness. I think a lot of that has to do with imagery trying to convey this is not a place you want to be. But I think that we get a picture of what it'll be like in the time of the world before the flood, where it says that all the intentions of the thoughts of man was only evil continually. No one was wanting to do any good things. I think Sodom and Gomorrah is another image of this. I think to some degree, the time of the judges where it says that everyone just did what was right in his own eyes in Israel. I think that's maybe like a little snapshot taste of what hell might be like. The only difference is in hell, you've made your decision, that's where you're at, so there's never going to be a judgment on the wicked. There's never going to be a cleansing to let good flourish again. There's never going to be a king that sets up righteous order in the kingdom. And so that is what hell is. And so whenever you talk about freedom, technically you might have free will to want what you want, but you can't necessarily do what you want because the restraining providential hand of God has been removed. We've said, hey, we don't want you, God, and God says, okay, well then off you go where I'm not going to be running things. And then that is what hell is, the absence of the presence of God and his grace and his provision and his restraining hand. Heaven, on the other hand, is the place where all that is broken, all that has gone wrong in the world and in our hearts has been restored, has been healed, and now we get to enjoy life as God designed it to be. So in that sense, we're way more free than the people in hell, because in heaven, we are going to be able to, we will not be restricted by the restraints of the corruptions and the perversions of our nature and of our spirit. And so therefore, we're free to go do the things that we could not do, that we would not be able to do in a fallen and broken world. Now, a couple of the examples that the person gave of freedoms that would be lacking. One was we're not allowed to be sad. Well, first of all, why would you want to be sad? That's not really that's a bizarre thing. But on the other hand, there's a sense in which we actually are. I don't think there's going to be anything in heaven that is restraining us, restricting us from going and being sad if that's what we want to do. But since everything has been fixed, the brokenness is healed, what is wrong in us has been made right, the situations in this life that stimulate the emotion of sadness, they're going to be gone. So the reasons to be sad won't even be there. So, are we free to be sad? I think in heaven, yes, absolutely, we will have the freedom to be sad. We just won't have any occasion by which we would be sad. Likewise, when it comes to the worship of God, Right? If the picture you're having of worship is just an eternal church service where we all sit around, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya, that's not worship. That's not heaven. Okay, worship is whenever you take something and you make it the utmost in your affections, when it is the greatest and you give it the praise and adoration it is due. So whenever you're in love and that other person just consumes your thoughts and your desires and you want to be with it, you're worshiping. That's worship. So we're going to be worshiping God. And you say that, well, we can't choose to not worship God. Well, in order to not worship God, we would have to actually take God out of the position of the greatest in our affections and put something else there to where we say this is better than God. The only problem is there is nothing that is better than God. And in heaven, with our perceptions, our understandings, our hearts healed and restored, we will understand that. So one comparison, you'll excuse me if it's a little crude, is I've heard about food. What if you had the access to the absolute best gourmet meals that you could possibly ever want? They're just fantastic, fabulous, and you could have that, or you could have a dog poop sandwich. Well, now you're free to go have the dog sandwich. You're free to go over here and eat the mud pie. You're free to go over here and eat this nasty thing. But are you going to? No, you're not. You're going to be, okay, let me see. Here is a turd sandwich, and here is gourmet meals galore. Oh, yeah, here, let me go have the dog poop sandwich. That's not what's going to happen. And in heaven, we have God. We have the essence of being and the grounding of all good and righteousness and all good things. The source of everything that we could want is there with us to enjoy that fellowship and that communion and that relationship. And so, yeah, sure, okay, we may be free to go do something else. We just won't. Because it really is that kind of comparison. And so this idea that heaven and hell, oh, well, these two options, these are bad. Why would you want either one of them to be true? Well, if heaven and hell are what you're picturing it as, I don't want those either. But that's not what heaven and hell actually are.
Wow. I like how this question answers itself. You see, Cyrus the Skeptic says towards the end of this clip that you have no choice in what you are shaped and molded into. That's exactly the point of free will, here and now, which allows you to shape and mold your desires and worship, for lack of a better word, to either bend you more towards yourself, your desires, and how you want things to be, or you seek to align yourself with God's will. While alignment may not be perfect, the afterlife provides a fulfillment of choices already made. So, in essence, there is no need for free will to cease to exist when you have already made your choice to either be in a loving relationship with God or to reject that relationship. Now, why would we want either? You tell me. Why do people choose to have children or choose to get married? Love and solid relationships always exceed selfishness in terms of its rewards in the long run. If you can't see the appeal in that, well, I'm not sure what I can really say to help.